Canto 11. Summary. The stench rising up from lower hell is so strong that Virgil decides to wait a while until their senses grow accustomed to it. As they wait, Dante asks his guide to fill the time with some beneficial discourse. Virgil obliges and describes the structure of hell. It becomes clear that Dante the poet wishes us to think of hell as a giant funnel, with circles growing smaller the further down one goes. Lower hell, circles 7 through 9, are populated by the violent and the fraudulent. The seventh circle is divided into 3 sections, or wheels, in which are punished those violent against neighbor, against self, and against God, respectively. In the 8th circle are punished those who commit fraud against strangers. In the 9th circle, the lowest point of hell, earth, and all the universe, where Dis, or Satan, himself is imprisoned, are punished those who committed fraud against friends. Dante, appreciative of this explanation, asks why these are divided from those who are punished outside of the gates of Dis. Virgil reminds him that, according to Aristotle, vice can be divided into 3 categories: incontinence, malice, and bestiality. Malice and bestiality representing fraud and violence, respectively. But because sins of incontinence are the least rational of the vices, they are less offensive to God, and so are punished in upper hell. Following this, Dante seeks clarification on a certain point about usurers and how they offend against the bounty of God. Virgil, referencing Aristotle again, notes that art, or human industry, follows nature, divine industry. Thus, an appreciation and respect for nature and her student, human industry, are necessary for human flourishing. The usurer disparages both, quote, placing his hope elsewhere, end quote. Though this is oblique, Virgil is probably saying that instead of trusting to God's goodness in creation and man's duty to work hard, the usurer trusts only in himself to the point of doing violence to the divine bounty. Noting the position of the constellations, were they visible, Virgil decides the time has come to go. It is around 4 a.m. on the morning of Holy Saturday. Canto 11. Discourse on the Structure of Hell. Above the highest brow of that great cliff, formed by a circle of crumbling boulders, we stood over an even crueler crowd. And there, on account of a horrible excess of the stench cast up by the deep abyss, we returned back to the cover of a grand tomb, where I saw a writing that stated, "I guard Pope Anastasius," drawn away from the strait by Photinus. We must rest a while so that our senses might get somewhat used to the putrid breath, able then after to pay it no heed. Thus my master, and I, so that the time might not be lost, find some compensation. And he, "You see, I am thinking of this." "My son," he began, "within these rent rocks run 3 smaller circles like those you leave, each circle growing smaller further down, each full of wicked souls. So that the sight of them alone might suffice, understand how and why they are constrained by justice. Of every malice, hated by heaven, injustice is the end, and every end grieves someone, either by sheer force or fraud. But fraud is man's particular evil, and so more hateful to God. Thus below the fraudulent stay, struck by greater pain. The violent fill the first of these circles, and since one brings force against 3 persons, in 3 wheels it is divided and formed. Against God, oneself, and one's own neighbor can one bring force against them or their things, as you, with open reason, will now hear. Death by means of force and painful damage one deals to his neighbor, and to his goods ruin, fires, and damnable extortions. Thus homicides, those that wrongfully wound, saboteurs and marauders all within the first wheel are tormented and punished. A man can turn violent against himself and his own goods, and so he must repent in the second wheel without benefit, whoever removes himself from your world, who gambles and squanders his resources, who weeps where he ought to be light-hearted. One can bring force against the deity, with a heart denying and blaspheming him, despising all nature and her bounty. In this way, The smallest wheel seals its sign on both Sodom and Cahors, and he who, speaking, despises God with all his heart. Fraud, which picks and nags at every conscience, man can commit against one who trusts him, against the man who trusts him not as well. This latter mode, it seems, cuts bonds of love only made by nature. Wherefore within that second smallest circle nest themselves hypocrites, panderers, fortune-tellers, falsifiers, thieves, and simonists, fawners, barrators, and similar filth. By the former mode one forgets that love that nature makes, and that which comes after, from which a special bond of faith is born. Thus, in the smallest circle, at that point of the universe where Dis himself sits, all traitors are eternally consumed. And I, Master, your reason runs most straight and clearly distinguishes this abyss and that host of people it possesses. But tell me, those of the festering swamp, those thrown by the wind and beaten by rain, those that collide, wagging such biting tongues, why, if God holds them in wrath, are they not punished within the red city of flame? If he holds them not, why do they suffer? He answered, What makes your intelligence wander so far from its accustomed course? Or where, elsewhere from truth, does your mind gaze? Do you not remember those very words with which your ethics touches on the three dispositions that heaven does not will? Incontinence, malice, and a reckless bestiality? That incontinence offends God less and so claims less reproach? But if you consider well this judgment and bring to mind those who, outside these walls, shoulder suffering, you will clearly see why they are, from the wicked here below, separated, suffering with less pain the divine punishment that hammers them. O Son, restoring every troubled sight, you always satisfy, such that to doubt is no less pleasing to me than to know. Return, if you will, I said, to that place where you stated that usury offends the divine bounty, and untie that knot. Philosophy, he answered me, to him who understands, notes, and not in one place only, how nature takes her course and flows from the divine intellect and his art. And also if you note your physics well, you will find, after not many pages, that your art follows nature as it can, as a disciple follows its master, such that your art is the grandchild of God. From these two, remembering Genesis and how all began, man must draw his life, advancing, too, the lives of his people. But usurers keep to a different path. They disparage both nature in herself and her student, placing their hope elsewhere. Now, keep close behind. It is time to go. The fish dart up across the horizon. The great bear rests above Chorus's winds, and our descent should be found over there.